Hi.
Hi, my name is Roisin O'Gorman. I'm in the theatre department at University College Cork, and this is Dr. Hanna Poikonen, who's originally from Finland and is currently in Spain. So just before we begin, just a couple of things from the Dublin Dance Festival, just to welcome everybody and welcome you, Hanna, to this event. It's part of the Dublin Dance Festival's Digital Capsule, and that is supported by Rothco as part of the Accenture Interactive, and just as their program, and just to thank them for supporting this particular event in the WiseMotion program. Under the auspices of the Dublin Dance Festival Digital Capsule. So yes, and just to also say that there are still 4 days left. The capsule continues through June 7th, and events and materials will still be available through to the end of June also. So please do continue to tune in, to keep moving, to share dance. And I also just want to say a heartfelt well done and thank you to everybody in the Dublin Dance Festival for doing an amazing job at launching this capsule, curating it with such care, and it's been lovely to be involved a little bit at the edges of that. But I know it's been a crazy time, and I just think it's really been wonderful that they could continue at this time. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Hanna Poikonen. She's got an amazing background interweaving bioengineering, neuroscience and dance. I'm dying to learn more about this incredible interweaving. We've had a taster through your 2 workshops and your talk, but her background is on her website, and she'll talk more about that as well, about the range of work and practitioners that she's trained with, and the places that she's lived and how that's informed her movement, and also this interweaving with her with the bioscience background. So Hanna, welcome. I'm sure we would have loved to have had you in person in Dublin, and we would have learned a whole lot more being in a room together, no doubt. But is there anything you'd like to say to start off the conversation?
First of all, thanking you, Roisin, and thanking the Dublin Dance Festival, because I was impressed how quickly they put up this digital capsule. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's very well valued, because we still need to keep the sense of community despite these kind of times we are living in. So it's great that everyone is putting in their part. So I'm really happy to be part of this.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit, Hanna, about how you developed this program? I love the title, WiseMotion. I'd love you to talk a little bit even about the meaning of that, but how you came to interweave these 2 very diverse fields that are often, too often separated, and that you have expertise in both of these areas is quite interesting as well. So maybe you could speak a little bit about just that development process.
Yeah, of course, I will be happy to. Actually, how I started was that I had this like art and science as very different fields in my life. So I started both when I was a teenager. I started dancing when I was 11. I started to be very interested in science also in my teenage. And I was always saying, also when I was studying in the university, I was saying that I relaxed from science with dance, and I let my body rest from dance with science. So I really saw them kind of nurturing different parts in me. But then thanks to some books I read and some interaction I found between art and science, and there was even a concept called art science. The book I found 15 years ago, and then I started to understand that actually in art and science we talk about pretty similar things. We talk about like the experience to be in this world. We try to understand this world. We try to understand ourselves. We try to understand each other. We just talk a little bit with different terms. So then I think that's how I started to see like, okay, well, if we are talking about the human mind, and then I never really saw the separation from the mind or from the brain to the body, since I had always this like very strong physical background as well. So then I somehow through that process, I started my PhD in neuroscience of dance and music. And actually during that process, I started to notice that there are a lot of good research, good academic research in the field, like showing the health benefits of arts, artistic experience, observing arts as well as doing arts. And I felt like I can't allow these good results to stay only in the academic papers, which are often written in a very kind of difficult way to access for a bigger audience. And I somehow felt that it's my responsibility to try to put it into the form that people also without the academic background can access that. And that's how I started to develop this WiseMotion method. And what is typical for it is that on every workshop we have, there is this movement like embodied experience, and then the neuroscientific presentation, scientific knowledge. So we kind of bring together these two in a concrete way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found the experience myself quite interesting, and I started with the dancing, the moving.
Yeah.
Before the talk, and there wasn't any prescription otherwise, and we do have a quote from Beckett up in the in our department is from Beckett saying dance first, think later, and I don't know if that really matters.
Yeah, I do exactly. That's it.
Yeah, it's not that it matters, but you know, it was quite interesting, and I hope to have a little bit of time to then take that information back into a movement, and maybe a sandwich would have been the way to go. Through those movement processes, there was a similar pattern in both of them in terms of how you instruct it, how you led the movement. Does that come from your understanding of the neuroscience, or is it?
Yes, quite a lot. Yes, because I want to kind of like, if we talk about the creativity or collaboration, where it starts from, it's to be tuned to ourselves. So that's why I want to kind of get us into the mental state where we are calm in our bodies, in our minds, and we are kind of, we could say that we are calmly aware. So we are not calmly in the sense of tired, but we are calmly in the sense of we are awake still. So then I think that's an ideal mental and bodily state to start work from, no matter what's the task then, what we actually are working with.
Right, yeah. Lovely. I did find the information, the neuroscience information, fascinating, and I'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about that work. I had a sense that there was a lot more that you kind of gave us, just that piece of information, and then maybe some people haven't had access to that yet. So maybe if you could give us an overview of framing, and then what even is a neural network, and maybe even basic that again, and how the science of understanding the brain and nervous system has moved forward into this understanding of actually reading the brain's movement patterns, which I think is quite interesting, rather than just its structures. I thought that was a very nice interesting.
That's true. In that sense, it has changed a lot, actually. But like as I would just say quickly, like a recommendation to do the material as you did in the order: first the movement, and then the neuroscientific material. Because as you said, it's quite complex and there's quite a lot of material. So I don't want people to enter into the movement material trying to think and connect the movement into the theory they already learned, because then it's easier maybe to understand the science once you have had some kind of embodied experience where you can anchor this scientific knowledge too. But when you asked about the neural networks, they're kind of, so as you said, that we don't talk about like that much of certain specific brain parts anymore, but we're more interested in the interaction. So the neural network, it's related to it's how are these different brain parts connected to each other? So how are these different regions in conversation with each other? So that's kind of the current trend in neuroscience. And also that what we, as dancers, we have known it forever, that the mind and the body are connected. But before, neuroscience was very focused on cognition. So attentional processes, working memory, long-term memory, and they were studied in a very kind of rigid cognitive way, where the brain was isolated into a dark, silent laboratory. But now we start to understand that actually for the brain to function the best, we need the rich sensory environment. We need interaction. We need colors and sounds and lights, and we need the movement. So kind of the movement, it's kind of fundamental unit also for the brain to function properly. So I think in that, we have made quite big steps in neuroscience, and I could say that these results have surprised neuroscience itself. Like I could imagine that neuroscience didn't expect that the movement and the emotions and all that would be so tightly connected and also connected to the cognition.
Wow. So that's very new research for neuroscience, the neuroscience field then.
Yeah, and it's still ongoing. So that's why I encourage everybody who have background in some kind of embodied practice, being it dance, being it martial arts, being it meditation. Like I feel like we would need more people with that kind of understanding also to work with the neuroscientific tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a question here from one of the people tuning in. Could Hanna tell a bit about her research on dance audience sharing the experience of watching a dance performance and how their brainwaves may start to synchronize?
Yeah. So actually that was exactly the topic of my PhD thesis. So it's free online, so that also, like, if someone wants to go really into the details, then they can see my thesis. But basically, what I'm studying professional dancers, professional musicians, and this kind of ordinary people when they were watching a dance performance. And curiously, I noticed that the professional dancers, when they were watching the dance performance, in this case it was on a video. Now I have the data where it was in a real theater, but I don't have the results yet. So I'm talking about this video pre-recorded performance. But in that already I could notice that the professional dancers, they had more kind of what we were talking about, this connections between different areas in the brain. So this kind of synchrony was stronger in professional dancers in that kind of frequencies, which is not so much related to movement perception as itself. It's more related to, we call it like higher brain processes, such as like emotional understanding the space and being aware of the space, memory processes, and so forth. And this was kind of first time when such results were found. Like before, the professional dancers and the neuroscientific results related to that were more related to the movement perception and preparation for the movement. So I found it fascinating that actually there is something more profound going on, and what is developed in the dance training.
That was your PhD research?
Yeah.
And then how did that influence your movement practice then? Once you had that finding, just make you more confident, like, no, I'm right, or maybe
in a way, yes, to trust more on intuition. So that's what I like. I feel that often dancers might be even disappointed when I tell these results or guide a dance session, because they expect that I would come up with some kind of new movement. But no, I think that the sensitive dancers, they are going to the right direction already. So then, like, how to create the sense of community, or how to prepare the body, like these habits which have been there for long, especially if we look at martial arts, they have been there for centuries. This intuition, how all that has been chosen, also the brain research start to support that. Mm-hmm. So instead of that, we come out with something completely different with the neuroscientific results. No, actually, it's just like strengthens that what we already know.
Right, and I think that is very important. I mean, I know in Ireland, dance is always holding its place and trying to grow it, but that understanding of it as being so much, as you say, profound and fundamental to our understanding, our interactions. And I do think that the current situation makes us really feel that in ways. So we are getting that knowledge, unfortunately, through negative experience.
Exactly.
So in the talk that you gave, and the very striking images of the brain changes under stress, I think at the moment we're all battling that in our own way. So I really found as well, we have again proof that we need movement, but also the particular kind of movement and the sensitivity in the moving that you're talking about, rather than just the sort of motoring without the sensitivity in the background. But it speaks a lot to the plasticity of the brain and that ability for the brain to change. And you've also worked in, I think, educational and therapeutic settings.
Yeah.
Would you be able to talk a little bit about those experiences?
Yeah, and I think that's actually where neuroscience plays a very important part, because I think dance has so much good elements to be applied both in education and in rehabilitation. But I feel like in those fields, it's not necessarily understood if we talk about it just in the terms of dance. So we need to kind of dress it a little bit more scientifically, even though the dance experience is the same dance, what we're used to having. But for example, when I've been working with MS patients or stroke patients, I have to say that I've been even surprised myself how quickly they get results. Like, for example, that they can, after 5 days session, there was a woman recovering with MS disease, and she could really feel how her balance got much better. So I was kind of reading the physiotherapy papers in physiotherapy. How do you usually, what kind of rehabilitation do you usually give for MS patients? And I put it into the form of dance, so that it would be kind of maybe more emotionally engaging, more inspiring in a way, and it wouldn't be just like mechanical repetitions, but it would come through the imagination and through creativity. So she, for example, she noticed that her balance was better 4 or 5 weeks after the training. So it wasn't only on the moment, but actually the results lasted. The same with the stroke patients, that they noticed that even their speech had improved. Wow. So I think it's related to because the dance is so comprehensive. You have so many elements. You have the music, and you have the movement, you have the interaction with other people, you have the emotional expression. So I think we can't pinpoint just one element. It's the entity. And that's often missing in a more like specified training, we could say.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. There's a question, there's a couple of questions coming in from attendees. Thank you for sharing those, and thanks for those thoughts. How is this description different to kinesthetic empathy and the findings on mirror neurons?
Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm a little bit critical. Like they explain empathy with the mirror neuron system. Personally, I think mirror neuron system has something to do. For the people who don't know what is mirror neuron system, it's this neural network in the brain which activates when we move ourselves, when I reach to take a glass of water. But the same neural networks activate when I watch someone else taking the glass of water. This theory, it's been expanded to explain also the empathy, how we understand the emotions of the other people, which I think it's part of it. So we kind of understand the gestures and the body posture, but I think it's also a lot related to the emotional and memory processes in the brain. So also, for example, different gestures, they have different significance depending on the culture and depending on also the personal history, the personal background.
And the contexts,
Yeah, exactly. So I could imagine that there will be interesting breakthroughs in this like mirror neuron system and empathy, this conversation.
And certainly as we're maybe more restricted on what we have access to mirror in the everyday. And there is a question about that everyday experience from another attendee. So again, thank you for your questions. During this time, this is the question, where movement and sensory stimulation is restricted, do you have any simple tips or small things we can do to help ourselves reconnect with our bodies day to day? It's a lovely question, because maybe we can't clear our heads for half an hour or an hour. Sometimes just in the length of the day.
Actually, I put online another workshop which was exactly focused on that. So I designed 2 workshops. The other one was like calming down the brain and the body, and the other one is enhancing awareness. So kind of depending which state we need. And if some easy tip would be to starting from the breath, just to be aware of the breath, and maybe at first not trying to change it in any way, just being aware. Okay, how is my breathing right now? So then just kind of getting curious, how does my body feel? What do I feel emotionally? And not necessarily trying to move it or change it, but then kind of facing it and then slowly starting to move, and maybe like if you have some favorite music on the background, then it can introduce you on this journey, which can really take you away from this harsh reality which many of us might be living at the moment.
Somebody else has asked, what's the difference or similarities dancing alone and dancing with partners? And that may be a question to do with the workshops, which you gave us the wall as a partner, which I think is just wonderfully resourceful too, very solid, very supportive, and different from going to the ground or going to the floor. But so what might be those similarities?
And often like when we do this workshop in the real environment, then there is the layer of dancing with other people and also experiencing how does it feel to do this very small moments, simple moments, but with different people and also in a group. So then you start to notice like how every moment is kind of alive. Like it's you can go and like kind of you can go into the situation like thinking that you know how it will be, because then the moment changes on the moment. So if we look at from the neuroscientific point of view, what's the difference between dancing alone and dancing with other people? Well, first of all, often when you dance with other people, there's the touch, the physical touch. And it's been shown that when we are, let's say, stroked or touched gently, first we perceive it on the sensory level. So in the brain, like you can see the sensory areas activate. Okay, now we sense it. But then something called habituation happens, that we get used to this touch. So it's the same, like in the morning you wake up and you put the lights on. First the lights feel very bright and then you get used to it. So similar kind of habituation seems to happen on the touch sensation. But what happens then over the time, let's say 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, the reward system in the brain starts to get active. So it's curious that when you are in this physical interaction with people for longer, then it starts to feel rewarding, and also you can see this change in the brain.
Okay, so it moves from habituation to reward?
Yeah, exactly. So even though the sensory like the sense of touch is habituated, the kind of the reward system is not. So the reward system, that activity gets stronger and stronger.
Okay, that's interesting in terms of motivation, and that feedback. At one point, so you're tuning out because you're habituated to something, and then how if you keep going with it, that pleasure reward can kick in. We just have a few minutes left. I see another question here. What embodied movement practices and practitioners have influenced Dr. Hanna's development of her WiseMotion work? Thank you.
Well, quite a few. So I try to put it short and mention just a few. Let's say martial arts. I used to do Tai Chi and also Kung Fu, even though it's more kind of stronger. The WiseMotion generally, it's quite calm. We seldom sweat really a lot, which is typical in Kung Fu. But I think that the connection of the mind and the body and the concentration, what is in martial arts, that I always found very, very fascinating. And no matter how quickly your body is moving, you're kind of like strongly present and calm in your mind, and very, very aware of that, everything what you're doing. And then of the dance styles, contemporary dance, of course, but it has so many directions. So then it really depends on the teachers. For example, I have had some interesting teachers from Mexico, from India, from here in Barcelona, and also in Helsinki. And then Buto, the Japanese dance theater, that I always found very fascinating, and the presence of imagination. And also how you perceive the body, like for example, this very simple exercise, body as a water bag. So you don't think about the bones and the muscles, but you really start to feel the body as a water bag, and then you start to move from there. So this rich imagination was something that really fascinating.
Yeah, lovely. And another attendee there has asked about how does your work relate to somatic movement or Hanna somatics? I don't know if you've worked with any of that in particular, but I would definitely see a lot of resonances across.
I've been training Feldenkrais and authentic movement, so I'm aware of them, and I'm sure they influence in an indirect way. But But for example, in Feldenkrais, you focus on like very subtle movements, and then you can really like, you notice the change in other parts the side of the body compared to the other one, for example. So maybe what I introduce is it's more holistic, and also I keep the neuroscience in that sense that I'm also trying to aim to certain mental states with the movement. So not only changing the bodily state, but also like keeping the mental state, and that very strongly tied. Like when I chant, when I design the movement journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it's great. There's one more question in here, and this will probably be the last one, given the time, which has just flown by. As we look to the future, when connection will be more at a distance than in person, how do you think this will affect our social bonding? And I might add into that then, like, also, where do you see your practice going and WiseMotion going, you know, influence from this crisis?
And I think I see, maybe because I have background in engineering also, so I see also the good sides. I think it's important to have the conversation, and I think it's important to be aware also of the challenges if we are with the screens, and if our interaction is based on the heads which we see on the screen. So what are we missing? We're missing the small gestures, and we're missing, for example, the moments of compassion, tapping the shoulder, and these kind of things. So I think the virtual world should never ever replace the real world, but then like maybe depending on the situation, maybe the balance might change. So maybe on some moments, okay, we are more in the virtual world, and we should really develop good content for that as well, because there might be moments when the physical presence it's not so available, so that we are not kind of in this empty space. And that's why I was really happy with the Dublin Dance Festival, that they really quickly replied to this kind of need, and that's what I've been doing with the WiseMotion as well, like really developing also and trying to find the essence of that and bring that into the online context.
Yeah. And I think we are all challenged in ways around that right now. And I think you have given us some tools, as well as some thoughts and things to think about, and ways to respect our brains and develop them, the connections both within the brains, within our community, and with ourselves. And I suppose I meant to say when we opened, to thank people for their patience with the postponement from Tuesday to this evening, but that was in solidarity and respect to what's happening around the world right now, and in particular in North America, and that all of this work, of course, we want to acknowledge the anti-racism that's central to the work of contact and social bonding and connection, and that, you know, that dance and our institutions can play a role in that as well. So I think that's our time for this evening, but it will also, you know, resonate onwards from here in time, and hopefully in time we'll be able to safely travel and connect and develop these connections neurally and in lots of ways. But I am very grateful, even though the virtual obviously is different and limited, I'm grateful that we have had this space and time together. And thank you so much, Hanna, for so warmly and generously sharing your wonderful work. It's so exciting to see this new development and the possibilities that you bring forward with that to us all. So thank you so much. Thank you, thanks again to everybody at the Dublin Dance Festival.
Yeah, thank you for all the great questions. I would have loved to talk longer, but unfortunately we have this time limit.
And Hanna, if people do want to follow up with you directly,
of course, just send me an email.
Do you want to give a shout out for your website or your various places?
Yes. WiseMotion CO, wisemotionco.com. So there is my webpage, and also the same is in social media. WiseMotion CO.
And the links are there on the Dublin Dance Festival events as well. You can find them there. Thank you all very much, and thank you for everybody who tuned in this evening or who has followed up online. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for participating. Hope to meet you in the real world some other time.
Let's do that.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.